All right, everyone's favorite legal analyst. Well, maybe just me and my family, but Nick's family too. But he is a senior legal analyst over at CNN. He's the author of a brand new book out. You know, we buy his books, and we encourage all of you to go out there and get it wherever books are sold. It's called Untouchable: How Powerful People Get Away with It. I can't think of anybody better to break down not only legal news, but tell us how powerful people are getting away with it than our buddy Elie Honig. Elie, Mike, and Nick, thanks for hopping back on the podcast with us.
Mike and Nick, thank you for having me. I want to proffer that I fall somewhere on the range between everyone's favorite legal analyst and just you two and your families. I hope there's some middle ground there where I can fall. It's great to be with you guys. We've got that Rutgers connection. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scarlet Knights for our recording here, one last night. So we are happy and in this recording. Elie, we're going to talk a little bit about the book here. We're going to talk about some legal news and get your takes on it and your expertise. First, for the audience that's tuning in, we've been seeing you doing the press tour now with respect to the book, How Powerful People Get Away with It. Like I mentioned, to Classified Docs Month that just happened in DC, there's a bunch of powerful people in the news that are getting away with things. Tell our audience about the book and what compelled you to write about it from your expertise.
So I'll tell you the story of how I wrote this book. My first book was about Bill Barr and how he corrupted the Justice Department, in my view. And shortly after that came out, my publisher, HarperCollins, said, "What do you want to do next for book number 2?" And I said, "I don't really have any great ideas at the moment." And they said, "Well, why don't you take a couple, days or week, think about this. What question do people ask you the most through CNN, through your writing, through your podcast?" And I said, "Oh, I don't need to take it a couple of days. I'll tell you right now. How does he get away with it?" That's easy. Now, who it is can vary. A lot of times it's Donald Trump, but there's many people beyond Donald Trump who people ask that about. And I thought, well, I could probably give a good shot at answering that. And what I do in the book is I pull together my own experience as a prosecutor, lots of stories about trials I did and challenges that I faced. Not all of them come out with me as the hero, I'll tell you that. I also sort of studied what's happened in our legal system over the last several years, looked at the laws, some of the big cases. And I have original reporting in this book. I tell some of the behind the scenes stories of what happened at DOJ in the Southern District of New York, my former office, and why they failed to prosecute Donald Trump as soon as he left office for the hush money crimes, which is now right back in the news because it turns out we're learning just this week that the DA, the state prosecutor across the street, is now reconsidering charging for that very same hush money scheme.
Elie, you mentioned, focusing on this last couple of years. Obviously, it's the subject of the book out now. But have you felt that there have been precedents or changes in the legal system that have made our most powerful even more beneficiaries or more likely to be protected?
For sure. So I really, if I had to lay blame for how we got here, I would put it 3 different places, combination. One is on our very laws and our processes that inherently favor powerful people. I'll give you an example of that in a minute. Another is on those savvy bosses, Donald Trump being among them, who know how to exploit those advantages. And third, I do point fingers at prosecutors. I was a prosecutor. I believe in prosecutors, but I also believe that prosecutors are not above criticism. Let me give you one example of the law. You asked about the law, Nick. For all the division that we've seen ideologically and politically on the Supreme Court over the last several years, conservatives over here, liberals over here, one thing that they have all agreed on is narrowing down the scope of our public corruption criminal laws. We've seen a series of decisions over the last 6 years or so that have steadily narrowed down the scope of how those corruption laws can be applied. And these have been unanimous decisions. It's the only time you're going to see Justice Sotomayor and Justice Kagan on the same page as Justice Alito and Justice Thomas. And Congress, I should add, could fix this. They could pass new laws. They could expand on what they've done and say, no, we did mean this to be a broader law, but they've not done so. And as a result of those two things, we have not seen a major federal prosecution under any of these corruption laws that have been impacted for really the past 6 years since this trend began. So that's one trend that works in favor of powerful people. There's many more in the book that I lay out that are either legal or sort of the way prosecutors practice as well.
Elie, I am mystified at the question that people asked you about how powerful people get away with it, because my question would have been, and let's ask Elie Honig this, how do we fix the criminal justice system in America? You've been involved in so many court cases. You teach law now to the up and coming folks that want to get into this. Now you're writing about a book about the screw ups. In essence, how do we fix the criminal justice system or the legal system overall in America?
So there's no one, easy sort of silver bullet fix here, but I think responsibility lies in a lot of places. One is, like I said, there are shortcomings in our laws that I think the courts need to do better on. Prosecutors need to do better. Prosecutors, I argue in the book, there are several cases where prosecutors essentially backed away from difficult cases, challenging cases, cases against powerful people, against political people, because they didn't have the stomach, because they didn't want to take the political risk. There are prosecutorial practices that favor powerful people. I write in the book about how it is policy at DOJ that people who may draw significant press attention if they're convicted, those cases have to go through more levels, higher levels, more rigorous scrutiny. That's a built-in inequity. So there's a lot of people who have a lot. And look, let's not lose focus here. Primary blame is on the wrongdoers. Primary blame is on criminal bosses, people who commit these crimes and exploit it. So, but that's always going to be part of our world here in the United States. You can't talk criminals out of criming, but you can fix laws and prosecutorial practice.
Yeah, you just mentioned the current attorney general, and you've been critical of him in the past. When you talk about political pressure, so let's step into the shoes of Merrick Garland for a moment. Because we've heard often from the Biden administration that they have tried to they are doing a better job of keeping that distance between the White House and DOJ.
Yep.
But what, in your estimation, about Merrick Garland seems to cause a dragging of the feet? Because we saw a contrast between the appointment of a special counsel to investigate what Trump was doing, in terms of the documents in Florida, versus the expediency of what we just saw recently with the current president. What's your assessment of what sort of causes him to move at the different speeds that he does?
So I praise Merrick Garland to some extent in this book. I think Merrick Garland has done a good job of reestablishing many of DOJ's core ideals. He's been honest. He hasn't lied to us, in contrast to his predecessor, Bill Barr. And he's done a good job of reconfirming DOJ's political independence. There was an incident that I write about in the book, maybe a year ago or so, a little less, when Joe Biden said publicly that he hoped that people who defied their subpoenas from the January 6th committee would be prosecuted. And immediately, DOJ, to their credit, issued a public statement saying, essentially, we don't take prosecutorial orders from anybody, including the president. And I say bravo to DOJ for taking that stance. So Merrick Garland absolutely deserves praise for that. I'm critical of his investigative style and the way he's handled his criminal cases. I believe he's been myopic. He's taken a short view. He is overly bureaucratic in the way he goes about it. Look at January 6th. Here we are 2+ years out from January 6th. He's charged, yes, 900, 1,000 people who stormed the Capitol. Good. Those are important cases. They've done a good job with those. Not perfect, but good. Not a single person anywhere near any position of power has been charged. That might change, but he's already wasted 2 years, and that matters. And Merrick Garland, one of his favorite things he says is, well, we start at the bottom and we work our way up. That sounds good at first blush, but that's not what good prosecutors do. You start at the highest point you're capable of starting. And a lot of times you can start in the middle or darn near the top. And in this case, there's no reason why Merrick Garland couldn't have gotten to and shouldn't have gotten to witnesses like Cassidy Hutchinson and Mark Short and Pat Cipollone 3 months after he took office, immediately. Instead, he sat back and spent all his time on the people who broke the windows. Meanwhile, the January 6th committee gets to all those people first, and only after that does Merrick Garland get to them. So his pace has been inexplicably and I think indefensibly slow. And that's not just a matter of me being impatient or people being impatient. That's a matter of the longer you take, the harder this is going to be, because you still have to try this case. Even if Merrick Garland indicts Donald Trump or something, it's going to be a year till trial with all the motions and appeals that's going to happen. Now you're talking about trying Donald Trump and asking a jury unanimously, 12-0, to convict beyond a reasonable doubt, not only a very popular, but also very unpopular former president for the first time in our history, but a guy who by 2024 is going to be in the middle of and perhaps, who knows, a front runner for the next presidential nomination at the Republican Party. And I think that delay is going to have a real cost when it comes to the bottom line trial decision. And I know trials. I tried a lot of cases. People say, well, but juries are going to put aside jurors are human beings, and they're subject to all of the biases and prejudices and fears that any normal human being is subject to. So I'm critical of Merrick Garland in that respect. I say in the book he could have gone for the jugular, but instead he poked at every capillary.
Very well said there. Elie, I want you to put back on your DOJ hat here for a second because you were just talking about jurors. They are voters as well, and voters don't know the difference between certain things. We played a clip of you on Anderson Cooper a while ago talking about the Biden classified docs scandal, for lack of a better term. Now, obviously, we have Mike Pence in the classified documents that were found at the former vice president's home. If you're looking at this, and I'm only asking this because we had a former FBI agent talk about how many people, millions of people, 4 million people that have access to classified documents, based on whatever their clearance is. Yep. I'm curious from your perspective, which one of these cases, because there's differences in all of them, and volume of documents doesn't necessarily mean what's in those documents themselves. Yep. Which one of these cases is the most egregious to less egregious? And obviously, it's a cluster of mishandling, but what should the American public be focused on with respect to the details of all of these three?
So first of all, you're right, and your guest was right. The classification system, people think that this is some orderly index system where we have like a central register of classified documents. Not at all. We have dozens and dozens of individuals, entities, agencies that have access to classified documents that can classify, declassify, raise or lower a classification. It's so common that classified information leaks out of the government. There's a word for it. We call it spillage. It's not as if you can just, again, if you were a public library and you could go, gee, where's this book? It's missing. Oh, let's see. Oh, Mike Leon signed it out on February 10th. It doesn't work that way. And so it's not really all that surprising that there are classified documents now turning up in the homes and offices of people who had access to them. I'm not making an excuse because you do have an obligation to handle them properly, which clearly none of the three satisfied. Each of these cases will rise and fall on its own merits. And you're exactly right. The key to me is not, it doesn't really so much matter the volume of documents. It's all legally about knowledge and intent. Did the person know those documents were in their possession and had been taken? And did they have some kind of criminal intent? If I had to rank them based on what we know now, which let's all acknowledge is incomplete, Trump is the most culpable. He has the most documents. He did not cooperate with the FBI. His lawyers made false statements to the FBI about whether they turned him all over. So I think Trump is clearly on the high end. I think Biden's in the middle, but a big gap, again, based on what we know. And I think Pence so far is on the bottom because what differentiates Biden is he and his team made misleading and incomplete public statements. There was a time when they said documents were found in the office, but they also knew that documents had been found in the home, and they left that out. And it's taken several searches over. They did a search, and they said there was no documents. Then the FBI did a search and found a few documents. So Biden has made things more difficult on himself through his sort of inconsistent and incomplete, his team's inconsistent and incomplete public statements. And that is part of what raised DOJ's antenna and got a special counsel appointed. Thus far as we know on Pence, his team disclosed the documents, and we don't know of any real detail beyond that at this point. There's no indication at this point that he's stonewalled or that he's made incomplete public statements. So, Merrick Garland's going to have to weigh all of these. As a practical matter, I think you probably can differentiate, but as a political matter, and I very much believe in the realities of the prosecutorial world, Merrick Garland, I think, is going to be very, very wary of the possibility of indicting Donald Trump on a documents case and not indicting Joe Biden or Mike Pence on a documents case. I think that's going to make him very uneasy.
Elie, we'd be remiss not to bring up maybe one of the most recent things that we've seen that may be potentially, protecting powerful people, which is the infestation within the FBI, or at least in the form of one agent, in Charles McGonigal, working on behalf of a Russian oligarch with ties to President Putin. When you think about what prevents powerful people from getting in trouble in this country, what is the role of something like that that I'm just sharing here in terms of that infestation of other moneyed political interests in some of our federal agencies?
So in my view, money, politics, and prosecution are a toxic mix. I was lucky that I only ever worked for appointed prosecutors. Federal prosecutors are all appointed or hired. There's no electing of federal prosecutors. And in New Jersey, the state AG is appointed. But most AGs across the country, most county level DAs are elected, and they have to raise funds as a result of that. And I give examples in the book of cases where DAs made very questionable decisions in favor of people who it turned out had given big campaign donations. One of the big offenders here is Cy Vance, who the former DA of Manhattan, who gave Harvey Weinstein a pass at first, who gave the Trump children a pass at first. And turns out in both cases, he had accepted healthy political donations from people who represented them or people around them. And then in the Trump case, tried to return it after he got found out, and then later took a bigger donation and then got caught and returned that. So he really, I think, drew out the problems that we have. There's not much likelihood of changing this, but I think all of our prosecutors should be appointed. It's not perfect, but having prosecutors be elected and introducing that aspect of money to me is toxic and undermines confidence in the system.
The best legal analysts out there, according to Carlos Leon, who lives in Connecticut, and Michael Leon, his son, who hosts this podcast. He is the host of the Third Degree podcast, a senior legal analyst over at CNN, and author of the new book, Untouchable, How Powerful People Get Away With It. You can get it wherever books are sold. Elie, you always have a home here. Can we please talk? Thank you so much for hopping on the podcast. Continued success with the book, and please stay safe.
Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it. Appreciate both of you. Thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks for watching the Can We Please Talk podcast. Whatever clip you just watched, we hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you stick around for some more. Subscribe to the channel. My partner's over here smashing the button. Come on, do him a favor. So hit subscribe.